say thank you for being invited in the first place. Richard Bamforth, Jake Davoile. I cover the north of England. Jake covers the south. As you can see, we're not salmon anglers. But, you know, we both fish, both interested in coarse and game species. We're going to be talking about what is often a very emotive issue. It's been interesting to hear over the last few days. It gets talked about, it just gets mentioned in a snippet, predation, and then it's pushed to one side until the last talk. We're employed by the Angling Trust, paid by EA rod licence fees. We've been here in post so far for about 2 years, and that's what we do. It's basically we go around the country, we're advising some fisheries on non-lethal methods, how to improve their fisheries, but also assisting with people on licence applications. And the initial period of our time was trialling the area-based licence, which we'll come on to next. Unfortunately, these are the two species that do cause the problems for a number of fisheries around the country, but ultimately, they're only doing to them what comes natural. They're actually taking advantage a lot of the time of things that we've done. And so we're dealing with, it might be small roosting birds, up to larger roosts, 350 in some cases on single catchments, that in a small space of time, I believe, but without the science behind it, to suggest that 350 birds on a lake system with a small river moving on down can have a major impact in a short space of time. And possibly we might have heard before that I may not have the data, but it would appear on other systems that is the case. Gooseanders, anything from small sizes, again, up to several hundred birds at critical times of the year. It was interesting to note the numbers that Niels was talking about. In England, the last official survey done was in 2012. We were looking then at about 2,400 breeding pairs on inland sites alone. Okay, that's in England. And then in the winter months, that gets exacerbated by migratory birds coming in, taking that up to the 30,000 sort of numbers. Across the country, floating around, hitting different waters, but I'm glad to say we're not at the same numbers that's been talked about in Denmark. So maybe we can learn a lesson there. But, you know, it's not all. We've got to accept they are merely a factor. They're part of the jigsaw puzzle. There's a multitude of factors affecting whether it be still waters or some and rivers as well. That's just a snippet, that's just me, top of my head, of things that you're looking at and what's affecting rivers, but predation may well be having an impact on some of those. And the bottom is just things that are happening to try and prevent those. You know, there's agricultural incentives, you know, Natural England, entry-level stewardships, higher-level stewardship schemes. A lot of you here will be doing riparian planting. You know, there's a multitude of things going on. The work that EA, Natural England are actually doing, the Wild Trout Trust, some of the fisheries, the clubs, it is commendable, a lot of the work that you're trying to repair damage and things that's done. Where essentially, it's all got to, a lot of the time, it's got to be backed up by research and then the political aspect from lobbying. At the moment, just very briefly, we've got 16 what we term area-based licenses across the country. And what you're talking about there is it's an umbrella license covering a number of fisheries within that particular area. And ideally, it's a catchment. Sometimes it's just a single club with their waters on. So we can start in the north, and we've got 82 kilometres of river there covered under one licence, encompassing 11 fisheries. And we're just trying to get those fisheries working together, coordinating their actions, being able to share resources that they've got, and ideally move the quota around within that system if they've got sufficient numbers to be able to move that quota around when they're getting targeted. Out to the left is the river system where, yes, 300, 350 birds, cormorants on that system this time last year, building up. That has hopefully been rectified by negotiations with the landowner where that was taking place. Moving down, the biggest one for me is one in the middle, and I totally accept for the chap there who's acting and trying to hold that all together. That's a lot for him to do, especially as a volunteer. Remember, all of these people that are doing this, I get paid, but I'm dependent on volunteers coming forward to try and help me to do this. And then other clubs down the river. Excuse me. That blue line is just the boundary between myself and Jake. We just decided, and if you think I'm looking at England, I do a little bit into Wales and a little bit into Scotland, but we are paid via rod licence fees, so that's what does that. But I'm up to the borders next week for a meeting on an estate. I'm now going to pass you over to Jake, and he's going to go into more detail on one particular area licence.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at the Hampshire Avon area-based licence. So the Hampshire Avon is approximately 60 miles from source to sea, down on the south coast, and it has a huge diverse range of species in the river. So sort of at the top end, we've got quite a lot of wild grayling and wild trout fishing, and then moving down, there's a lot of coarse fisheries, famous for its roach and its barbel and its chub. And of course, the Atlantic salmon as well as part of that. And they have huge salmon up to sort of like 35, 40 pounds, I think, each year. So the first part of the puzzle was to find out about the cormorants in the catchment. So basically what we've set up is coordinated roosting bird counts. These birds here don't breed in the valley. They merely come in during the winter, take up residence, and they're there to eat fish, quite simply. So this involves a lot of legwork, a lot of creeping around lakes, at night time, looking for birds. But by sharing the knowledge, we found a number of roosts that are pretty much from top to bottom. Then what we started to do is to look at the patterns of movement. So obviously, typically they'd be leaving those roosting sites at first light, coming in to feed on a variety of waters. And then depending on shooting activity and scaring, they're then moving around. So we're pretty much looking for maximum coverage in the valley, which we've got people under license from the top right down to the bottom, and this brings in 38 different fisheries, and previously that they would have been individual license holders. These cover the river, the tributaries, as well as still waters and trout farms that are dotted along the river. This brings in, I think, 3 major angling clubs, private estates, trout farms. And then alongside that, to fill in the gaps where shooting's not possible, we've then tooled the clubs up with things like starting pistols, bangers and rockets to complement that shooting strategy. So how it works, quite simply, and it doesn't always work as well, but we aim to get a coordinated shoot, a weekly shoot, where everyone's on the bank at the same time when the birds are coming in to feed. And then they're on their phones, and then they can ring the keeper on the beat above and say, look, you've got 100 birds coming up, get ready. And then we have a group email exchange so people can talk and discuss what's going on, basically just to keep on top of the cormorant behaviour, because that obviously alters as they begin the shooting. And then it's all fed back in on a password-protected site where they can feed in numbers shot, numbers seen, and all that's collated, so we've got that data coming through. As Richard said, we've got the flexibility in the bird allocation. So typically, on average, we have about 700 birds that overwinter in the catchment, and we have a license for 20% of those. That can be moved via the primary contact who coordinates all of this amongst the different fisheries. When we started this, it was a case of trialling all sorts of different things. So the picture at the bottom, I was using a quadcopter, thinking that might, do a trick on certain roosts to scare them. It didn't. It just, chased birds around. And whilst it was fun, it did make me think about what the cormorants can see as they're flying up and down the river. And cormorants have a seriously acute vision, basically. And what they can recognise is the person that poses a threat to them on a fishery. So they'll happily come down and land when people are angling, but they'll know the individual that's shooting. So they'll learn things like the keeper with his dog, or even a vehicle. They'll recognise that. So the thought process behind this was, we want to utilise that to protect the fisheries when the keeper can't be there, because they're not there, every single day to shoot birds. It's not, it's not what they want to be doing. So. Scarecrows have been used since, I think, the dawn of time. And the majority of the ones that I've seen are sort of pretty dishevelled looking things that sort of rot away over a winter, a football head, and they're completely, pretty much useless. Sorry if, you've got some of those. Yeah, well, yeah. So what I sourced was I sourced some mannequins from Germany. These are shop mannequins, so they're pretty good-looking fellas. High cheekbones and all that. And the first two that I got were stand-up guys, and I dressed them in my kitchen in camo and got these fake guns built on them. And then for some reason I had to nip out, so I left the house and completely forgot about them. My wife returned, who was 5 months pregnant with our daughter. She walked into the kitchen, flicked the light on, and then there's these two hooligans at the bottom of the kitchen. So I got a huge clip round the ear for that one. So they definitely scare wives, and it was to see if do they scare birds. So the first one went out. This is at Britford on the Avon, and the first one went out. And yeah, it appears to work in certain scenarios. So obviously, it's only going to work to the birds that are conditioned. So you need to reinforce it with the actual danger of shooting to kill to scare from behind it. Otherwise, they'll just habituate to it and be feeding right in front of it. I did get a bit wacky. I went on to then get a fake collie for him as well to complement it on the right-hand side. So yeah, they're out there doing the business. I suppose the idea behind it would be to, as we're conditioned, if you sort of catch a glimpse of a speed camera out the corner of your eye, instantly you put your foot on the brake. Well, I hope you do. So the aim is to condition birds as they're flying up. They see these deployed, and over time they're conditioned to stay away from those areas. So especially maybe during a smolt run, these could be used upstream of weirs and different obstacles. But it is key to maintain the shooting from behind them. Something else we've used, not so much on the Hampshire Avon, because unfortunately cormorants have a knack of picking places that you can't actually access, like wildlife trust sites and so on. But we have used them on a couple of the roosts to move them on, are lasers. So we've got the one on this, which is a little red beam. You can see that up there. What we've been using, and I've used these for years, these are the green lasers. I'll just switch this on, Richard. So you can see this one. So these things you can scare birds from. I've used them up to about a mile away, and a great tool for moving birds out. They're completely target selective, so you're not going to be impacting on maybe overwintering ducks that are of importance, but just part of the puzzle to try and address it. Ooh. Back to you.
One important thing, please, because we do get people phoning up saying they're absolutely no use, I might as well throw them at the damn bird, is twilight. Twilight is when they come into their own. And there are people in this room who have them with video footage of them in action. And yes, you've got to go the same night. They'll circle around, they'll come back in, but it's just you keep going that same night and then go back consecutive nights. And those birds will want to move. They will want to leave to get a good night's sleep somewhere else. Yes, I accept you are moving that problem to someone else or somewhere else, but you may be taking them off sensitive areas. Okay, we're not going to be in a position where the first one I mentioned, 350, not going to be able to get with the best will in the world. I cannot get you a license for 350 birds to go onto that private island to shoot them out. It isn't going to work. But we managed last year to actually move those birds off that system. They might have gone onto Mike's next door, I don't know, but no. We think we got them back down to the coast. Where the guys that were using it, I believe there was about 5 or 6 of them down that catchment at critical points, and they didn't find them roosting anywhere else. Numbers are built up again this year, but only into the 70s. The chap who was using it then has got in quicker, and he's removed them. I think it was in 3 nights, and the final night he went, he was down to 1 bird. And remember, that island is 600 metres offshore. Okay? I had the laser working to 2,000 metres. It was like thunder. You've got that amount of birds taking off. It's phenomenal. But again, it's species specific, so we're not trying to harm them. What we're looking at here is, we're on the Trent, and again, it's a bottleneck. It's a large weir, the top one. You drop down here into a big weir, fish get bottlenecked up, so we're trying to think about this in relation. You might have a smolt run coming down, you've got those bottlenecks. What can we do? Yes, there's a barrage there to stop. This is a canal system to let the boats go through, and the barrage is there just to stop any boats that miss going over, sadly going over there. But the cormorants use it again to their advantage. They feed all the time in this bottleneck and then just roost on the barrage. We just simply put on some gull spikes as opposed to pigeon spikes. And yes, it prevented the birds from roosting, just like you do on pigeons, and there's spikes on the buildings out here. Yes, they can still go on the weirs. Yes, they can still go on the bank sides and roost, but then the closer to human presence and the fearful of that. Then we used it, again, this particular site, you're not going to get consent to shoot and kill, but they were quite happy for us to, and I don't know which is the mannequin here and which isn't, but anyway, they were happy for us to use a starting pistol, and over a 2-day period, exposing them purely and simply to starting pistols, we could then just back away and watch the reaction of the birds when they then saw the mannequin sat in the same position, thinking that was it. It's just one of those sites. This particular site, however, we couldn't get consent for the similar sort of gull spikes. Again, this is this is Truesweir in Exeter, and they wouldn't grant consent here for the gull spikes. But then we move to this option. Anybody from the north of England may well be familiar with that structure. It's on my doorstep. It's pitiful at times, hate to say it, sorry. You go down there, it's a feeding frenzy. It's in a very urban site. We heard it yesterday. Herons line up there, cormorants line up all round here, and they're into the box all along there, and then out the bottom here, any fish spilling out are getting picked up by gooseanders and cormorants, and you go some days and you're talking up to 100 birds. Cormorants, gooseanders, herons. But it's not their fault, is it? It's not their fault, it's our fault. Because we put this here, they're doing what came natural to them. So what could we do in this place just to try and take away that pressure, ideally, on the smolt run? And things have been tried in the past to try and protect fish that do drop into these boxes. Ideally, if the tide's high, the river's high, fish go through, everything's fine. It's in those periods of low flow that we tend to get this bottle. And you can set your clock. You're watched by the birds. They know. It's like ding dong, food's on, and they're in there. So we were thinking about this, a fixed laser. So on exactly the same sort of mechanism of this, and is there some way that we could get that fixed in these areas? Again, I know I said twilight period, but gooseanders react a little bit more to the laser beam than what cormorants do. So would it be an option there? Could we use it? I don't know. It's something we'd have loved to have tried. We were looking seriously at this place, and it was going to be positioned somewhere here and firing with that being the backdrop, but there was too close a proximity to houses, and then we've got airport traffic coming over here, and it was just like, no. Yes, please, on that point, if you are going to use these things, for goodness sake, please be careful, all right? Don't play Star Wars with aircraft. These are the issues we do face a lot of the time. Maybe not in this room. Game anglers tend to be more proactive and they're on the ball, but coarse anglers at times can be so annoying, and you give them advice, they don't follow it, and that really does frustrate the both of us. Ideally on the area license, you are looking for complete catchment coverage. Otherwise, the birds will just duck into those areas where you haven't got that coverage and set up the roosts. There are issues potentially with different landowners and bodies who own water bodies of allowing these large congregation of birds either to build up and roost or to breed, and then they create the problems for the neighbouring fisheries around. We've got to work with those landowners, see if we can come to some compromise. Inadequate allocation is something that we hear a lot of the time from some of the licence holders. Some are happy, some aren't, and we're going through that process at the moment. And then we have our usual hassle when it comes to the actual allocation of licences and some of the time delays involved. But at the end of the day, someone passed me, I think David's in the room today, in fact he is, and he sent me, it was an article, I think it was in Fly Tying, where they were just shadowing the smolt as they walked down the river and providing human presence on that riverbank to usher the smolt down at the critical times where you think they're going to be more open to predation. And it's similar what they do in European countries, where they then follow the turtles to the sea. Okay? There's nobody killing the seagulls here, are they? They just they pick them up, take them to the coast, let them go on. It was similar on the Dee, I believe. There might be somewhere here from the Dee who can tell us a bit more about that. But yeah, that's what are the critical times when you've got that smolt run, you might have to do that and increase public presence on the river, at those bottlenecks, at the confluences, at the notable pools that you know you've got, and protect them. Can't do it 24/7 all year round, but at those critical times, and try and just maximise that smolt output. And that's it. Thank you.